Hello and welcome to TVOL, where we talk about tactics and their evolution. Today we're going to be focusing on the defensive prowess of Manchester City. We are going to talk about how Manchester City defend away from their own goal, using the example of a recent match between Manchester City and Wolves, which finished in a 1-0 victory for City. But before we jump into that particular match, we're going to reflect on the context and the extent to which Manchester City have used their defensive structure, how they work against the ball to achieve results in recent seasons. What we're looking at here is data to capture the number and the quality of chances that Manchester City concede against their opponents. This is measured by expected goals against. In the season where they didn't win the league, so this is 2019 into 2020, you can see that their expected goals conceded is relatively high. You can see a significant dip, which is a positive thing in this case, in the middle of last season where they did win the league. And you can also see the same trend, starting off relatively high, but the number and quality of chances that they're conceding is now significantly lower. The point there is that Manchester City, as the season progresses, are limiting the extent to which their opponents are creating chances against them. Much is said about their attacking ability, potentially less is said about their defensive ability, but that is possibly the reason that they will win the league. The extent to which they can limit the opposition chances, both the quality and the number of chances. You can see that there is a considerable difference in this regard between Manchester City at 0.64 per 90 minutes versus their nearest challengers, Liverpool, at 0.92 per 90 minutes. As I said before, we're going to take a look at a recent game between Manchester City and Wolves in order to try and figure out how Manchester City are achieving this. Now, this was a very one-sided game, not if we look at the score, which of course was only 1-0, but when we think about possession, Wolves had hardly any of that, and they had even fewer chances created. They created quite a good chance right towards the end of the game, which would make some people think that they had the right sort of strategy and they could have, as they say, nicked it at the end. But I think you can more strongly argue that Manchester City had complete control of the game. Had they did score right at the end, it would have just been extremely lucky. It's funny because you can argue that Wolves had a negative, perhaps even overly defensive approach in this particular match with their attempts to stop Manchester City breaking through their low defensive block. But you can argue that the most important feature of this match, tactically speaking, was the extent to which Manchester City prevented Wolves from doing anything at all. This data in front of you is capturing passes per defensive action. This is a measure of the overall intensity of the press, how much pressure the opposition puts you under. What the numbers mean specifically is that on average, Manchester City allowed Wolves to make 6.3 passes before they tried to tackle or intercept the ball, or whatever defensive action it might be. Wolves, by contrast, stood off and allowed Manchester City to have a huge number of passes on average. The point though here is that Manchester City prevented Wolves from building out from the back, from progressing through the thirds, and really smothered them with their proactive defence higher up the pitch. And now we will take a look at some pictures from the match itself and try to figure out how Manchester City achieved this. Moving on to Exhibit 1, here Wolves have spread out across the pitch with their centre-backs, and they are looking to build out to the left-back. What Sterling is doing crucially is curving his run. So this is a technique where often a wide forward, in order to prevent progression down the flanks, is not going to run in a straight line to close down the left-sided centre-back, but is going to curve their run to close down that left centre-back whilst also blocking the pass into the left-back. In order to make this approach work, you have to move up as a unit on that particular side of the pitch in this case. So not only is Sterling pressing and Bernardo Silva and Jesus, as you can see towards the left-hand side of the screen, but Cancelo, who is a right-back, at least theoretically speaking, is pushing up right up against the Wolves left-back. Switching over to the opposite flank, we can see Grealish doing exactly the same thing as Sterling was on the right-hand side. He is curving his run, which has the benefit of putting pressure on the right-sided centre-back this time, but also preventing progression, or at least making progression difficult to the right-back. So with that option cut off, or at least difficult, the right-sided centre-back is going to try to play the ball into Neves, of course a technically highly proficient player, and he's going to try and progress the ball from there. But you can see immediately Silva sprinting out to put pressure on that situation. This looks like the exact same picture, doesn't it? It is in fact 9 minutes later in the match. Jesus this time is a little bit deeper. He's pressing the ball. So this is clearly a rehearsed move by Wolves, moving from the right-sided centre-back into the feet of Neves, but Manchester City are making that incredibly difficult by moving up as a unit. The point that I'm making here overall is that Manchester City have well-drilled and rehearsed routines for when and how they press the ball and how they adopt their defensive structures. Of course, they must have a plan B for when that doesn't work out, for when they are exposed and they need to run back towards their own goal, and you will find them, as is often discussed, fouling the opposition, in this case Traore. One of the things I find especially fascinating about the City approach is that when they are unable to form a complete defensive block, often a 4-5-1, to try and cover as much of the width of the pitch as possible, they will adopt this 3-2 block. And it's intriguing because it doesn't necessarily matter who the players are, they just know as a team that they need to form as quickly as possible this block, and also have players down the sides, depending on where the opposition takes the ball, in order to mop up and intercept. The other thing that Manchester City do in general, both from an attacking and a defensive perspective, is that they try to congest and have numerical superiority, which is a posh way of saying more players than the opposition, in the centre of the field. And what they are looking to do here is where the opposition is in more advanced areas, in this case they've just passed the halfway line, for maybe the first time in the match so far, is that they're looking to funnel the opposition wide rather than through those central areas. So here I think you have Neves on the ball. His most obvious and clearer options are either towards the right hand side or towards the left. Again, it's relatively congested in the middle. Neves does in fact in this case try a riskier progressive pass through the centre, where it's more dangerous for them to create goal scoring opportunities, but that ball is intercepted, I think, by Rodri. Final example here of the Manchester City approach when they are in deeper areas. So where the opposition has the ball, Traore here is identified as the obvious danger man for progressing the ball up the field through his dribbling ability. But the Manchester City are forming this 3-2 block, as previously discussed. They try as far as possible to quickly assemble a spare man, in this case Zinchenko, on either side, depending on where Traore is going to look to try to dribble past them. But it's going to be extremely difficult. You see in recent matches, for example, PSG managing to break through this block and create goal-scoring opportunities. But those are some of the best attacking players in some cases of all time. So it can be done, but for a player of the level of Traore, it's not possible in this case to get past this block. So today we wanted to highlight the work that Manchester City do without the ball and the defensive structures that they manage to achieve in order to prevent the opposition creating those high quality chances against them. If you like this video, please express that by hitting the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time.